So picture this. You're on a train with 13 other passengers heading to a small country in the Eastern Union. While on the train, you have a dream of a man under a large moon and are welcomed to the Festival of Termina, a cosmic celebration hosted by the trickster god Rear, lasting a few days. Some pretty concerning stuff. But where it gets worse is that the train has come to a stop. Your fellow passengers are figuring out what to do. If you adventure towards the town, you'll encounter some things best left unseen. And then you realize what that man's speech boils down to. You and 13 other passengers are now contestants in a battle royale. You have no idea what's happening in the town, and you have 3 days. This is the premise for Fear and Hunger 2 Termina, a survival horror RPG that has hurt me in a way no other game has. And whether from Stockholm Syndrome or genuine enjoyment, I want to share it with you. This video is my review of Fear and Hunger 2 Termina, giving an overview of the game before revealing the fate of my character I created in my harrowing time with Fear and Hunger 2 Termina video. And before I begin, the game features some heavy subject matter. The warning on the store page and title screen are not just for show. If you want to avoid that, feel free to do so and it's all good. You gotta take care of yourself. But if you've braced yourself and are curious about what's in store, welcome aboard as we look at Fear and Hunger 2 Termina. The word I would use to summarize the experience of Termina is unfair. Think about some games you've played. They may have featured a tutorial holding your hand until you've proven you know how the game works, then they send you on your way with a smile and the assurance that you're going to be okay. It's a traditional practice to help players get their bearings, but then arises the question, would every game be better with a tutorial? A sense of logic and fairness is great to have, especially in a game that's trying to be fun. But what if it's not focused on giving you a good time, but instead wants the player to feel at the mercy of threats much larger than themselves, making the player frightened to take on its world through its systems? This is the experience Fear and Hunger 2 Termina captures exceptionally well. To start off, we have 3 different bars to manage. A hunger bar will decrease unless you eat some food, the consequences of which will affect your performance in combat. A bar labeled Body is your health bar, and Mind is both your MP bar to use abilities, and a sanity tracker that can be replenished by enjoying luxury items like tobacco and alcohol. These bars add pressure as you play, constantly depleting, which incentivizes you to explore the town and loot barrels, pots, cash registers, and anything you can get your hands on. So far, this doesn't sound so bad, right? It sounds like a standard RPG with a spooky coat of paint. Here's where that assumption gets curb stomped. If you find a treasure chest, instead of just getting some sweet loot, you flip a coin. If you're right, you get some random loot. Congratulations! But if you're wrong, the box's contents have decided to take a rain check. Move along, please, you're wasting time. While trying to scrape by, some inhabitants will want to properly welcome you and initiate combat. And if what wasn't already mentioned wasn't bad enough, do you remember that clip in JoJo's where those guys are beating up that civilian, and then Abakio drinks some wine and does the same? Well, you're the civilian, the first 2 are inventory and RNG, and the third guy is combat. These confrontations are some of the most nail-biting moments in this game, not just because of the incredibly well-drawn abominations, but because every combat encounter has stakes. The game allows you to target limbs of your opponents, letting you remove sections to prevent certain attacks. For example, suppose you encounter a humanoid and they have a weapon. In that case, you can target the arm holding it and remove it from the encounter. Now you get the game's attitude, you may think, but wait, that sounds manageable, to which the game agrees. So they allow enemies to do the same thing. If you lose a limb, it's gone, reducing your effectiveness in combat, and unless you're willing to bargain with some otherworldly beings, you won't get another one. This can include your arms, preventing two-handed weapons to be used, or your legs that will deny the option to run and will have you crawling to move. And even if the enemy doesn't cut off your limbs, they can poison or cause infection, which, if not treated quickly, will result in a game over. Coin flips are also used in combat. If a boss attempts to do a fatal move, you call it and hope for the best. The result could be really painful or just a straight up game over. You can get party members, some of your fellow contestants, to explore the town and take on fights together, allowing another turn in combat or another person to split damage with. But it also has the downside of maintaining another 3 bars of hunger, body, and mind, having you go through twice the amount of resources, and that's just for one additional person. And imagine maintaining all these things, your inventory, the RNG of loot drops, and the terror of each combat encounter, in addition to managing only 8 guaranteed save files to do it in. Because you have 3 days. Each time you rest, the time will progress, changing the location of certain enemies and your fellow contestants, engaging in their own journeys across the town. If you rest where enemies are nearby, they will decide to wake you up so they can use your skin as a blanket. And if they kill you, even if you're hairs away from saving, all that progress is gone. This isn't a rare occurrence either. Throughout multiple playthroughs, I made great chunks of progress only to encounter a powerful foe or land in a trap and lose it all. With all these factors combined, I'm sure you've got a clear understanding of how cruel, punishing, and even unfair the game can be. Now, if this is your first exposure to the game, you may be thinking something along the lines of, wow, that's cool, I won't be touching this with a 10-foot pole. And I can definitely see where you're coming from. What I haven't mentioned yet is how you can flip that punishment on your opponents. Because the most powerful thing in Fear and Hunger 2 Termina isn't stats, but your knowledge on the game and its systems. Those first couple of attempts will be a very humbling and frustrating experience, but what is built in place of your pride is a small understanding of the game. One that will expand more and more until you reverse that suffering in a devastating and well-earned counterattack. That could be learning the location of traps, which enemies to take out or escape from, how to traverse the town, or even optimal times to save. That personal sense of discovering a trick to bypass or solve a problem will have you feeling like the smartest person alive, which could be as small as managing resources or figuring out the trick to fighting an opponent. Because when fighting an enemy, it appears like a turn-based battle, but what it is a puzzle. All the enemies have quirks, and if you can exploit them, the fight becomes a cakewalk. This isn't like a From Software game that's focused on player input execution to succeed, but instead, a puzzle that once you get how it works, you can solve every time you find them in future playthroughs. And that can't be taken from you, no matter how much you die. With the randomized nature of items and treasure chests being a dud or not, you never feel like you're in complete control, but instead given a strong foundation that can improvise with whatever's thrown at you. It's the type of game, if you, myself, and insert another person here all played the game simultaneously, our playstyles would vary depending on our character, which skills we picked, which loot we got, our pace, etc. For example, my favorite character is Don, and one of his skills is Organ Harvest, which allows him to take organs from his opponents to heal status conditions that may require resources I don't have. And another one that made me feel like the coolest was his Analyze skill. Most opponents will have a weak point that, if attacked, will quickly end the encounter, but if you go for it right away, you'll have an incredibly high chance of missing. This can be remedied by targeting other sections to make that weak point vulnerable. With humanoid enemies, this could mean weakening their legs before going for the head. What Analyze does is, if the enemy does have a weak point, it becomes highlighted, and the player can now attack it as if it was vulnerable, meaning they can skip all the work beforehand and go straight for the kill. Of course, some enemies don't have one, so you may just waste a turn, but this was viable enough that even a boss for one of the endings can be affected by this skill. And I felt like such a delighted little gremlin when I attempted to do this, and like an awesome game master for a tabletop RPG, the game went, hell yeah dude, go for it. Or what if we took another option? Let's say you wanted to play yourself, so you picked Marco. His Thug class allows him to be an absolute unit in combat, allowing him a stronger guard, a higher chance of hitting with bare knuckles, and a few other tools for overworld exploration like lockpicking, allowing you to unlock doors without using a small key, a rare consumable item. But let's take this further. What if you really like punching stuff, which enables you to make 2 different attacks if you have both arms? And if you found a Small Things amulet or bumped your agility during the character backstory, well, congratulations. If that stat is over 16, that allows an extra turn which can be used to guard, use an item, or to do more punching. Or what if you're playing a different character and want either of those abilities? If you kill one of those contestants, you can obtain their soul, unlocking their skill tree for your character, allowing you to customize your playstyle further. And I'm sure you get the idea. Fear and Hunger 2 Termina gives you various tools and systems to survive in whatever way works for you. It's one of the coolest parts of this game, and something that can't be replicated when watching a walkthrough. That's why, if the subject matter is something you're okay with, I would highly recommend giving the full game or the demo a shot. Chances are, you're going to find a cool way of playing the game and notice small details most haven't. That sense of discovery and the story it tells will be your very own. And while this isn't a necessary part of enjoying the game, I just want to mention the online following for Fear and Hunger has been pretty awesome. It's a similar feeling to Dark Souls when it came out, not for being notoriously difficult, but as a community piecing together the game with its lore and systems. The developer of the game, Mioro Hevernen, is working on updates even during the creation of this video. After doing a playthrough, I had a blast checking out some of these videos to improve my understanding of the game. From stuff like the certified channel classics I've mentioned before, like Zaldim's in-depth look at both games and Wormgirl's awesome review and lore videos, to some other cool stuff like Maw the Dog's Secrets video that revealed details hiding in plain sight that blew my mind. There's this video by Trot the Fox that acts as a great beginner's guide if you want some tips starting out and doesn't give too much away. Then there's Rapallo94, who did some fun runs of the game, and wait, he and Wormgirl discussed the lore of the game, opening a book of enlightenment for the viewer? Hell yeah, dude, let's go! For something as oppressive and bleak as this game, there's something incredibly fun about a group of people sharing what they know. When something gets suggested by an algorithm, it's random, but I'm happy this was something that got the spotlight. This game is excellent, and it's cool to see something get the credit, especially something created mostly by one person. And the additional content from fan art, music, animation, and videos covering the game created by people has the potential to help highlight it, and that's pretty sweet and exciting. And on the subject of stuff I enjoyed, these are the contestants of Fear and Hunger Termina, and these are the characters I liked. An eagle-eyed viewer may have noticed that no one has changed on the list, and that's because I really like each character. While I've got my personal favorites, each one of them has depth to them, and even a monster like Caligura provokes enough mysteries that I'm curious to see how they develop and what their deal is. As mentioned earlier, whichever character you play will have the other characters following their routines depending on that day, interlocking with others and creating a situation that makes the world feel tangible and surprisingly realistic. And to detail, that's one of my personal favorites, is how each character has a backstory that the player can interact with. Decisions can affect their skills and items you start with, and if you're not into that, you can skip the process. And the game goes even further by allowing dialogue to be different for which character you play. A small one that blew my mind was when I was playing Dawn and was talking to Olivia. She mentioned having a medical condition, and when I asked which one, she said something like, "Oh yeah, you're a doctor, you would know that." It reminded me of the tag system from Divinity Original Sin 2. I was really impressed with how subtle and low-key Termina presented it. Like, it was an option, but it was just as viable as any other choice in dialogue. It's a cool touch, but I also like how, depending on your player character, you can have certain interactions with other characters, giving you a unique perspective on the game in addition to having information the others won't. Even if you have them in your party, sometimes they're just things they don't feel comfortable sharing and will leave you curious, until you play them and go, "Oh, I get it now." Now, I've been talking very highly of the game up to this point, and I want to mention a few critiques before we go on. Two are the most prevalent to me, one more technical and the other more of a thematic suggestion. On the technical side, I've had multiple times where the game's frame rate drops during exploration, especially when the mob enemy shows up from one side of the screen, and the game slows down as if grabbing my leg and saying, "Get 'em boys!" or moments where movement is essential and the game slowing down makes doing that more difficult, intentionally or not. I'm sure it may be an RPG Maker engine problem and a challenging fix programming-wise, but if possible, that would be pretty cool. And the second is more of a narrative critique. So I like the game's premise and how the other contestants will shift around the town during the 3 days, but with the exception of 3 contestants in the player, it feels odd that no one's partaking in the festival. When the train comes to a stop, most of the passengers either peace out for their own goals or stay on the train. And I could understand that they're still getting their bearings on the first day, but it feels strange that on day 2 or 3, most of the characters are in a similar state in the first. The only one who pushes the Festival of Termina would be just a couple of people, including the player. Like, you look at the concept art for the game and go, okay, this is a game of death that is pushing people to their mental and physical limits, doing whatever they need to survive. Even the backstories do a great job of acting as rationalizations to make it through this. But then you play the game, and most everyone is pretty cool with each other, and it requires you to be the aggressor or rear's influence to make it happen. Without going into spoilers, the game actually pulls this off with one of the characters and does it really well. So my suggestion would be to have the other characters nudged into partaking in the festival. It could be in minor details, like throwing out the idea of taking out the other contestants, or how the game occasionally does it, have an interaction with another contestant, and you have the chance to intervene. Or what if they set a trap or enemy trigger while out of your party, leading to a situation that could be your death unintentionally. These are just some ideas I'm spitballing, but I think adding more agency to the other contestants in this game of death would convey just how terrible the situation is, and how it takes a group of mostly well-meaning people, throws a knife in an ever-enclosing room, and silently watches as their moral compasses crack. And speaking of moral compasses, I think it's time to answer the question, what happened to Stien? The first part of my playthrough was insanely good. My knowledge from the demo provided me a route to get a hold of some items, and the treasure chests were incredibly kind to me, offering some really good gear like a Small Things amulet to raise agility, a Ring of Wrath to gain health each turn, a Death Mask for extra defense, and a certified Prehavil classic, a Salmon Snake rune, which prevented the loss of limbs and bleeding. The heroine from Needle allowed me to recruit Levi, giving me 3 party members on the first day. After so much time in the demo, the old gods were smiling on my playthrough, and Stien may live to see another sunrise. And that feeling of optimism, of hope that maybe things were gonna be okay, lasted for 15 minutes. The dynamic shifted when I encountered the enemy type, the Bobby, vehicles of the town's sense of justice donned in these early British uniforms. They have this quirk of growing their arms back, so you have to destroy them to prevent their attacks. There's also another essential tactic in them staying dead, but I didn't know that lesson at the time, but this encounter instilled it into me. That lesson began when taking down the creature. I attempted to perform a medical diagnosis, and this happened. Fear and Hunger is one of the few games in recent memory that had me taken aback so much I stopped clicking dialogue and sat there in silence. And it did it twice, this moment being one of them. The Bobby pulls himself back up, ready to fight again, and I learned then that you have to beat the Bobby while they're down to stop moving, and Levi paid the price for my mistake. During the fight, the Bobby cracked his baton over Levi's skull, and the poor boy collapsed onto the stone streets. There was no cutscene for him, no final words he got to say when it happened, just the shock of the event and the corpse. We ran from the fight and booked it deeper into the city, and while it was a game, I felt the guilt of that fate in my stomach. I got the impression that while he was capable in a lot of ways, Levi was still just a kid, younger than I am, not just my player character. He needed someone to look out for him, someone to let him know that everything was going to be okay, and that we were going to make it through this together. But my mistake led him to being removed from the rest of the game. And that sense of guilt is only going to get worse as the run continues. While escaping the Bobby, Abella and I run into Pocket Cat, a figure donned in a cat mask and already has me paranoid without dialogue. He gives a speech and claims we've met before, but this time adds how he's a merchant and his preferred currency is the heads of the other contestants, offering some skin Bibles and other books to help out if my RNG is bad. That's a great system, though it's funny he says this with a party member directly behind me, with a pretty attached head at the moment. But there's no reaction from Abella during this, so she's gotta have some solid mental fortitude before Pocket Cat leaves, saying he'll have a special deal for me in the future. Anyway, we journey into the town, dodging combat encounters and escaping into the Church of Almer. I was familiar with aspects, but there were a few changes. The first was the cutscene that initiated it. A black-haired girl was confronting a priest named Father Domick. They talk about a girl named Marina, one of the other contestants, and the way he talks about her sounds like a combination of anger and a hint of compassion when he hears Marina is in town, to which he gets visibly upset, before attacking the girl and dies at the end of her knife, molding into the floor. Cautiously, we explored the chapel, coming across a confessional, and I don't have a concrete reason for walking into it, but a multitude of smaller ones. I felt bad about Levi. I had slayed many people in the town already. I wanted to see what would happen, and my character seemed like he needed someone to talk to about the events so far. So Stien sat down in the confessional, the claustrophobic box creating an atmosphere of condemnation and spite. And surprisingly, there was someone on the other side, willing to listen to his sins. So Stien confessed to those he killed, saying he felt bad about it. The voice challenged that claim, asking if it was just to save face of normalcy, or did he truly feel remorseful? Stien said the latter. But my favorite part of the exchange was the next line. The person on the other side asked if there were consequences for the act. The one that felt the most in character was Stien saying, "Everything has consequences," to which he replied, "Very true. But it is not always you who has to live with those consequences, though." And that was the lesson that would be cemented in this playthrough. When I walked out of the confessional, I was rewarded with Affinity of Ulmer, which was a cool reward for partaking in an interesting conversation, before I find the man listening in on the other side. Turns out, it was Osa, one of the other contestants, who was just messing with me the whole time. What a lovable asshole. For real though, Osa just wanted a better understanding and apologized a few times during the exchange for the trick. He pieces out, and I begin hoping I can get him as a party member because he seems pretty cool. But that sense of jocularity deflates when Abella and I make our way up the chapel rafters, looking to find a way to the lower parts. We get attacked by these pillar men, not the fabulous ones, the morbid ones. These enemies have a mechanic where you can target parts of their chest, the trick being if you look closely, there's this pulsing in one of them, and if you can wound that one, they'll run out of breath and die. But I realized this too late, as the pillarmen whittled Abella's HP down until I figured it out and hit the right one. It did a final blow before tumbling on the wooden beam, and my only other party member was killed. And I was alone, on the rafters with no plan, and the cherry on top was my misstep from the rafters, falling back to the first floor. At first glance, it seemed like minimal damage, until I read the text saying my ankle is hurting really bad, meaning I could no longer run with my character, a skill I'd been relying on ever since starting this run. Before I left the chapel, I read in a journal about the location of these effigies that can unlock a secret path through the church, one located here, the other at an apartment in the west side of town, and the final at the orphanage. I now had a plan. So I hobbled my character through the entrance of the city, doing my best to dodge the bobbies and gunfire, until I made it back to the train and decided to progress the day. It would look better with some rest. All it took was one section of time to have my beautiful run transformed into utter pain, with my teammates of Chads and Chadettes killed and my ability to sprint taken away. At this point, I was entertaining the idea of starting a new playthrough. I had a similar thought with Lisa the Painful, but I pushed through that one, so I figured I should do the same for this. It felt in the spirit of things. And I'm glad I did, because what happened next changed the personal narrative my character was creating and made something much more interesting. On the late night of the first day, I was looking around, retracing my steps to see if there was anything I missed. And it was in the outskirts of Preheville where I found my answer, revisiting the partially destroyed shack to find 2 dead villagers. But the most important part was the ritual circle of the old gods behind them. I walked over to it and noticed the symbols I could draw. One of them caught my eye, that of the goddess of creation and fertility, Sylvan, a deity Stien has some history with, his parents being devout followers, donning their bunny masks and partaking in physical and spiritual bliss in the fields across the country. When his parents disappeared one day, he was removed from Sylvan's influence. There was no more temptation to follow in his parents' footsteps like they always wanted. He was alone, but that solitude offered freedom. And now, years later, in the Festival of Termina with nowhere else to go, Stien crawls back to Sylvan, etching her symbol in the floor. This act appeases Sylvan, so she offers one of her lost children a gift. A complete healing for Stien, including his ankle, allowing him to run again. This was a mechanical moment, but when considering the role-playing in mind, this was one of the turning points in my playthrough. In the character intro, Stien had an option to either attempt honest work or become a pickpocket. That latter option allows for additional affinity with Sylvan and an ability called Loving Whispers. For my character, I chose honest work because that lifestyle he lived already took so much. And even if it was mechanically better to do the latter, I felt like Stien deserved a clean break from her influence. His life was already hard enough. But with how my playthrough had played out, this moment had some emotional weight behind it, willingly choosing to compromise my character's beliefs because this festival had kicked him down hard enough that he needed every tool at his disposal to make it out alive, even if they already took so much from him. With this act of rejuvenation, I began exploring the town, walking through the alleys. But before I explored one of the apartments, I had an interesting encounter. It's the Yellow Mage, Osa. He's decided to hunker down at this particular location, and any attempt to get close will result in him attacking me. He makes his intentions clear in this exchange, saying in a general sense, I don't know you, and I'm asking you to keep your distance. Nothing personal, but I don't want to take any more risks that aren't needed. Super cool encounter. Really dig it. Kinda sucks it's right where I need to go, so I'll go around, I guess. Eventually, I found the apartment building. It seemed like any other structure until I looked inside. It was covered in dust and mold, having these strange enemies called neighbors trudging along. But that's not the strangest part of this. That's the television that only plays this news broadcast with Karen talking about a series of murders in this building, which ties into this cool puzzle where I have to find the journal left behind by the killer. Then reading the pages, deciding which resident he's referring to, culminating in entering their room numbers in this washing machine. The code is randomly generated for each playthrough, so while I may be sharing the general idea, it may be a different answer when you play it. Anyway, I go into the rear dimension, ready to look for the effigy, before I listen to this area's music. The soundtrack of Fear and Hunger 2 Termina up to this point has been pretty cool, with some unsettling tracks and the occasional ones that make you feel like this is manageable. That is, until you begin listening to the song Relentless. As you scramble for the effigy and dodging the neighbors, this track accompanies you. And this, combined with my inexperience of the layout, led to a pretty rough game over. While being chased by one of the neighbors, I run to the stairs assuming I can get to the next floor, before realizing it was blocked as my opponent pulls a Prince of Persuasia and I can't escape. Then, I get bodied pretty hard. So, I do all these steps over, and after about 20 minutes of searching in the dimension, I finally find the effigy and book it out of there. I make my way out of the apartment, glad I never have to go back there again. Hey, what's that noise? So we go through all that again in half the time, and as I leave the alley, assured I won't have to come back, and wow, that sounded pretty close. Let's take a look at, oh no thanks, bucko. I'm so glad I can sprint again. I take a power nap on the train and look over my skills in the hexen. It started to click that depending on which symbols you draw in the ritual circles, or when you increase your affinity with the gods, it allows you to dip more into their skill tree. Anyway, I wake up at the start of day 2. Walking out into the misty afternoon, I see Olivia examining some plants, and she tells me that Marco went deeper into the town to look for something. For what? I'm not sure, but I figured I'd head in that direction to check on him. And I'm so glad I did, because I found him in front of a Luger, the gunman being Lieutenant Pav, a man I met when I escaped the bunker with the Bella on the first day. I have a couple of dialogue options, but don't want to risk it, so I charge at Pav. The fight ends in a few turns, but what's interesting is that when he's defeated, the game says I obtained the Chaotic Soul. I don't know what that means yet, but I'll take it. And in a move that had me respecting Marco, I found out what he was looking for, as I saw him holding a wheelchair. He wanted to find something so Olivia could get around. With a Bobby chilling in the background, he offers his thanks, and when I ask why Pav attacked him, he admits he was the aggressor and punched first, seeing the Bremen uniform, and with that, the Bobby sees us off as we head to the train. When we get back, because Olivia has a mode of transportation now, I can have her in my party, and Marco too. For most of the run, these two are some of the finest party members I could have ever asked for. I can't stress enough how great it was to have a team. While we drained our resources quicker, we had extra turns in combat, making fights with opponents like the Beekeeper have a higher chance of victory. It gave me a sense of control in— oh no. Okay, where did we leave off? Ah, yes! So, the three of us traveled to the orphanage. We found these little cherub guys that made it pretty clear what happened to the remaining people here. And it didn't help the mood that I had my organ harvest skill ready to go after any battle. Make of that what you will. As we traveled further into the orphanage with my complete party of myself, Olivia, Marco, and my burlap sack that is technically a whole person, we walked into the hallway with two symbols carved on the left and right sides. Those of Grogoroth, and oh, look who it is! It's Sylvan! Yay! And what follows is one of the most unsettling encounters in the game, that with Father Hugo. The fight seems like a standard Dark Priest encounter, throwing spells at the party, until it takes a strange turn when Father Hugo decides to show his sweet Top Gun Maverick boxers, and then lights the room on fire, which, yeah, they're great, but sir, I'm kind of uncomfortable right now. And the part that's throwing me off is the look on his face. It's like a strangely at peace mannequin. Even when all of this crazy stuff is going on, this all occurs with no dialogue. So once the fight is over, we look around and find the rear dimension, having this trench layout in the Great War, quickly finding the next effigy, and then heading to the final one. While on the way, we see this awesome club. It's got this jazzy track, and it's a small section of Preheville that feels safe. It's one of the few places where you can talk with your fellow contestants as people, asking what brought them here and any plans for the future. I even promised Olivia that once this was over, we'd check out a club like this, but one with people, and excitement, and stuff. This tiny slice of relaxation is much appreciated. When we arrived at the chapel, we found another rear symbol, and I meet that girl with black hair once again. She seems upset that I'm here, transforming into a monster called Dysmorphia, and combat begins. This fight was pretty tough for me. Her hurting spell can remove limbs, and I realized only after the fight I gave the salmon snake rune to Olivia, which caused Stien to lose both his legs in the fight. And we barely won, with Olivia getting a critical hit with an officer's sword on her head, slicing it clean off. I then had to crawl out of this dimension, blood dripping onto the floors, and thanking myself for not using the ritual circle nearby, allowing me to draw another symbol of Sylvan and repairing my missing limbs. Once I place all the effigies in the chapel, a secret pathway opens. While it does have the occasional enemy, it isn't too much trouble. And then, we met him. Wielding two great spears in each hand and having the look of a monster from Bloodborne, we met Rancid the Circle in the Temple District. He hits pretty hard, but the one saving grace is that once you remove a limb, he tells you how you guys are causing all sorts of problems before bailing. Once the fight ended, I felt we were in a pretty good spot. We were on day 2 and the tower was just ahead of us. But then, something strange happened. I walked to another place called the museum, which had other people there, but something was off with them. There were glass cases with artifacts and some powerful gear stashed inside, and when I solved the puzzle involving a clock, we traveled below to find this area called the White Bunker. Its doors locked away from us, which left me stumped on what to do. And then curiosity got the better of me. What would happen after the 3-day time limit? Would the game follow through with its premise, or was it there just as an initial hook? Once I saved my game, I began progressing the days until I saw it. All of the contestants, with 2 exceptions, have the possibility of becoming moon scorched. It's a transformation that twists the contestants into monstrous forms, each unique to the person. I'd seen it before with the Mayor, Abella, and Dysmorphia, but Dawn's is special. Not the golden star, that's great special, but special in italics, underlined, and let's throw in some quotation marks for good measure, because he has a unique scene if you ever reach this point. You're in a dark void, and then... Wait, what are you doing here? Oh no. Stien becomes Pocket Cat, a being created from the trickster god Rear. He's mentioned in a few books that can spawn every playthrough or two. From what I understand, it seems like Pocket Cat can take human vessels to enact his will, and my character is one he's considering. His life has been a tragedy stretched for 28 years, and if I don't leave this place, if I don't do what I have to do to get Stien out of here, this will be his ending. So, at the start of the next phase of time, I make a decision. I decide to hunt down all of the other contestants, no matter how bad it feels to do so, even though I have nothing against anyone. Even if I would prefer if everyone could make it in the end. Even if I grew fond of Marco and Olivia. I needed Stien to be the only one left to see the festival to its conclusion. What followed was a series of attempts to find all the contestants as soon as possible. Stalling would make it worse, as the contestants could turn into moon-scorched forms. Better to rip off the band-aid. This was the most agonizing part in my playthrough. It wasn't just that this was a callous thing to stomach as the player, how I willingly chose to do this for wanting to see the end, but also because I restarted this quite a bit. I once had an attempt go so well, I was so close to finishing, only to fall into a trap and immediately die. Or the worst one, I got so close. 3 people were left, myself, Olivia, and Marco. With a heavy heart, I went for Olivia first. She actually is really tough to fight, and if I didn't use Loving Whispers, an ability for raising affinity with Sylvan that restores my health, I would have lost. But when the fight was over, I was immediately restrained by Marco. What followed was the toughest part of the game. Stien was tied up on the train. I alternated the arrow keys to break out, but I couldn't. And Marco walked towards me. He didn't yell at me. He didn't hit me. He just looked at my character and asked, "Why? Why did you do that?" And when I told him it was inexcusable, he said, "What's in the past is in the past. We can't get our wrongdoings undone, but you can try to explain it." And that felt a lot worse than just a game over. It showed that Marco was more than just a thug, but someone aware of what's going on and quite reflective. I couldn't find a good explanation, so he left. And I tried to escape again, which led to me being transported back to the dream, awakening with the ropes untied on the final day. And when I was playing, I remember just standing there by the train, figuring out what I was thinking. I was getting impatient. I wanted to see the end of the game, but I hated the price I had to pay to see it. I didn't want to look it up, but discover it firsthand. But that conversation with Marco was a tough one. So I put the game down for a few weeks, until I steeled my heart and tried again. And I did it. I found all the contestants. I didn't have it in me to finish Olivia and Marco. The enemies were the ones that got the finishing blows, which, at least in my head, painted the idea that we're all going to make it together if it wasn't for this turn of fate, even if I didn't heal them after combat. Which is a very Canute from Vinland Saga kind of thinking, but when you play Fear and Hunger Termina, the pragmatic and cold parts of yourself get their time to shine under the pale moonlight. But I did it. I didn't feel great about it, but I was ready to see the end. On the late night of the 3rd day, after raiding the museum for the great sword in the case, I approached the tower, making my way up the elevating surface, and meet face to face with Perkel and Rear. Or at least, I thought I was. As a reward for being the last survivor, the servant lets me in on a secret. Rear is gone. What's left is a dull corpse of rock. The old gods aren't here. The symbols drawn to them only granted whispers of their power, a pale imitation of what they can achieve. The Festival of Termina being created by Rear's followers to live in the chaos it causes. Perkel tells me my bloodlust is not as strong as he was hoping for, so the only thing he can offer me is freedom, which I can certainly try prying off his cold, dead hands. And the fight begins. And I realize quickly that I couldn't win against him. He has 2 turns. The first will summon Lunar Meteor, a move that will always hit and deal around 40-50-ish damage, about half my health bar, and a flurry of feathers. While I can use the skill Analyze, my turns are spent healing up, so I can't do damage, resulting in my defeat. And I start to get frustrated here. I was so close to the end. It was right within my grasp, and at this final wall, I could not break through it. I tried changing my strategy, but the result was the same. And as I was losing hope, thinking that I had to go through the entire process again, I had an idea. I will now share with you what tomfoolery I did to defeat the final boss of Ending B. With the Enlightened Soul from killing Osa, I obtained the skill Spice Forge, which lets me augment some of my spells. And then I remembered consumables are a thing, more than just replenishing hunger, mind, and body. So just before I went up the elevator, I broke out a purifying talisman for some magical defense, the pep pills I got from the beginning of the game in the character intro sequence, and the final piece in making this possible, I remembered I picked up some stuff from Needle. While it has its heavy drawbacks, this was a matter of life or death, and it was right at the end of the game. So as I ascended the tower, I break out a syringe, skipped the monologue, and the fight begins. And already, it's insane how effective this strategy was. One of the pros of the ladder consumable is how it buffs all your stats, giving me an upgraded guard, and the best part, giving me an extra turn in combat, meaning I could just swap between dealing damage to his weak points, guarding, and healing when appropriate, making this fight a cakewalk. I feel accomplished, and once again, feel like the coolest person in existence for this goofy makeshift strategy. And then the moon comes down. The fight looks scarier than it actually was for me. Rear has this move of sapping away your mind bar, and once he does a certain move, if you fail, it's an instant death. But because my character was so mentally out of it with the drugs, I sidestepped that problem, which went into creating one of my favorite images of a video game in recent memory. The image of a doctor, jacked up on pharmaceuticals he found in the street, wielding a greatsword he stole from a museum, beating the ever-living shit out of the moon in the 1940s. It's like Da Vinci or DiCaprio. It's art. And after this beautiful display, my character wakes up on the 4th day, the morning light of Preyhaville shining, and I'm happy for Stien. It was a nightmare, but one that could finally be put to rest. Feeling at peace, I looked forward to the ending. I heard there were ending slides for each character. I was looking forward to seeing what it would do for Stien, and what positive note we could end this playthrough on. And the game took its sweet time, lulling me into a sense of security and hopefulness before saying nothing. I think it's best if I read it aloud for you to paint a clear picture of how devastating this conclusion is. Well, that solved nothing. All this and you're still none the wiser. Mystic deities, unknown gods, unholy rituals, nuggets of information. Were the answers buried somewhere amongst all this madness? Would the answer even matter anymore? If the Baron von Dutch had dirtied his hands with blood, then you had reveled in bloodbath in comparison to get where you are now. You hear the heavy footsteps of that wicked cat. He knows what you've done. In Preyhaville and before. The cat is circling around you in the darkness, just beyond your line of sight. Maybe you should take his offer. What else have you got going for you? Nothing. That's right. It's peculiar, isn't it, old sport? The life that is. Yeah, so this ending bummed me out a bit. That's not me saying it's bad, it's actually a fascinating note to end this character on and introduces some questions. Such as, why has Pocket Cat been following Don for years? Is it the straightforward answer that he's dealt a rough hand in life and the creature sees potential in him? Or, as a servant of Rear, is Pocket Cat trying to distract Don from achieving something that could meddle his master's plans? Maybe he's the one that got away from the gods and wants to rewrite his allegiances. Or, and this next one I'm not so sure about, still, in the spirit of the metaphorical book club discussion about Termina we're having right now, what if these events are predicated on Don having the blank soul? In this game, each contestant has a different type of soul, like Osa having the enlightened soul, Marina the changeling, Pav the chaotic, etc. But Don's is blank, an empty canvas with nothing marked. So what if all the events in his life have been orchestrated to happen to lead him into the position of becoming a host for Pocket Cat, that blank soul free to twist and paint into whatever someone has in mind? That could be a stretch, but I find it interesting that this character is the only one with a unique Moonscorch transformation, and their ultimate fate is either dying or becoming Pocket Cat. Even if I tried to prevent it, it just happened anyway. And that's a fatalist but satisfying way to end the character. While I respect it immensely as a great ending for this survival horror RPG, I also feel so bad for him. It really seems like he's depressed and just barely hanging on, and if I were in his position, I would have crumbled ages ago. He reminds me of James from Silent Hill too, not in appearance, but narratively. He travels to a foggy town willingly because he doesn't have much going for him after the death of his wife, and he has the possibility of giving into despair in one of the endings. But here, it's not just an option, It's the only one where Don makes it out. I think I feel the way I do about it is that Miro has done an excellent job at making this character. He's a great game designer, but dang man, he's a great writer too. He had me invested in this character when I was playing him, and even more so when having him as an NPC, traveling across the town and seeing what kind of dialogue he prompts. One of my favorite details is if you enter the jazz club with him in your party, instead of taking a break, he says, "I need to be doing something," and he'll act as a bartender, offering you a drink to replenish your mind bar like Henry can do with hunger. It just feels so perfect, like of course Don would be a bartender. And on YouTube, I got recommended this exchange with Marita and Don, which is my favorite in the game. The video will be in the description if you want to check it out. I believed in Don's personhood, and having this character start off in a bad place before falling into the abyss is pretty hard to stomach. While it's a downer, it's awesome to see a game conjuring these feelings of sympathy and sadness within me when I hit those credits. And looking back at it now as I write this script, I'm thinking about something Pocket Cat said at the museum. I'll be paraphrasing it quite a bit, but it goes something like this. There are two types of artists. One is an extroverted artist, one who looks at the suffering and pain of the world and reflects it in their art. And the second is the introverted artist, the one who looks within to create. Both are quite selfish. The extroverted profit from the pain of the world, and the introverted are quite self-obsessed. But the third, did I say two? I meant three. My favorite type, actually, are the ones who simply create but don't have an end goal in mind. They let the art make itself. Such a chaotic process can lead to unexpected directions. When I was making this video, I didn't have a plan for how I wanted it to end. I had an idea, sure, but as the pages increased, that idea didn't feel right. So I don't have a positive note to end it on. I don't have a cynical take to ground the experience. But what I do have is this. Fear and Hunger 2 is really good. It's a game that will beat you in the back of a restaurant parking lot mentally and emotionally, and you will thank Rear for it. I hope this video was entertaining for you. Hope it was a nice additional companion piece if you were curious about the game, or wanted to hear another person talk about it. Thank you for watching, and I think I'll end this with my favorite quote from the game. Oh, the big Chad got up!